Good morning, students. We have finished the chapter on nomadic empires, and today we would be starting a very interesting topic about changing traditions. Now, this is now from nomadic empires. We are gradually moving towards, a situation which was there in Europe, because we just saw the situation in Asia and Central Asia. So we would be now talking about Europe. So changing traditions. We have, but students, let me tell you one thing. I think there is this chapter about, I think it was chapter 4 in this book, which is about Islamic crusades and the Christian crusades and the Islamic empire, the Khalifa, the Caliphate, Abbasid, Umayyad. We have not touched that chapter because I firmly believe that that chapter can only be understood when when we have the board and you are in class, and then I can teach it. So I have put that chapter as a reserve. I would certainly do it once we are in class. Okay, so in this chapter we might be coming across certain things which have been mentioned in that chapter, which I would definitely try and explain. Okay, so let's start. So changing traditions. We have seen how by 9th century large parts of Asia witnessed a growth and expansion of great empires, some nomadic, some based on well-developed cities and trading networks that centered on them. The difference between the Macedonian would mean the Greek, Alexander the Great was Macedon, Roman and Arab empires, and the ones that preceded them, that is, that came before them: the Egyptians, the Assyrian, that is the Iranians, Chinese, and the Mauryans. Was that they covered great areas of territory and were continental or transcontinental in nature. The Mongol Empire was similar. Different cultural encounters were crucial to what took place. The arrival of empires were almost always sudden, but they were always the result of changes that had been taking place over a long time in the core of what would become an empire. So essentially, what they are saying is an activity which in the early days might appear to be an unimportant or an inconsequential activity, whereby something is happening somewhere and maybe some rulers or some princes are doing something, but gradually those very rulers become extremely important. They become empire builders. And because if you read, for example, we just finished nomadic empires, and if you read about Genghis Khan, for the first 40 years of his life he was just another nomad like millions of other nomads, right? So no one, because he did not have that great pedigree, he was not the son of a great Khan or anything like that, right? He just started a very, very normal and a very difficult life where his father was killed when he was very, very young. After he got married, his wife was snatched away from him and taken away from him. So he, along with his brothers, they had an extremely harsh life, and he did certain things, and he was trying to make a life for himself and a way for himself in the early days. So that not just in early days, almost for the first 40 years of his life. And for the first 40 years, no one would have ever imagined that this man, Temujin, would one day become the great Genghis Khan, one of the greatest military generals and leaders the world had ever seen. So that's what this paragraph is talking about. So traditions in world history would change in different ways. In Western Europe during the period from the 9th to the 17th century, much that we connect with modern time evolved slowly. The development of scientific knowledge based on experiment rather than the religious belief, serious thought about the organization of government with attention to the creation of civil services, parliaments, and different codes of law, improvements in technology that was used in industry and agriculture. The consequences of these changes would be felt with great force outside Europe as well. So students, what they are talking about, and this paragraph tells you about that, from being hunter and gatherers, every society on this planet and civilization on this planet started as hunting, with hunting and gathering food, but then gradually they evolved into much more complex societies, and with far uh, elaborate economic activities. Now people started getting into, from just being hunting, doing hunting and gathering, people started into medicine. They started going into mathematics, astrology, astronomy, science. So laws. So all of that started happening gradually. And as we have and we would study further in this book, that by the time the industrial revolution happened in the 16th and 17th century, we were actually that is, in fact, it continues even today. Okay, for the last 400 years, we have been doing almost the same stuff. Right? We have been industrially advancing. Economics happens to be the most important activity that human beings indulge in. You just look at the world around you. Every morning around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, your dad leaves some place to work, whether it's a shop, it's a bank, it's an office, it's a factory, wherever it is. He is going out to work, and he returns in the evening, and after a very hard day's work. And again, every morning, the next morning rather, he would be leaving his home. So economic activity today consumes most of our time, and because that happens to be the most important thing that we do. So by ninth century, the commercial and urban centers, yeah, Aix, London, Rome, Siena, though small, could not be dismissed. From the ninth to the 11th centuries, there were major developments in the countryside in Western Europe. The church and the royal government developed a combination of Roman institutions and the customary rules of tribes. The finest example was the empire of Charlemagne. If you have studied, you remember we had studied when we were studying the Roman Empire in Western and Central Europe in the beginning of the ninth century. Even after its rapid collapse, urban centers and trading networks persisted, albeit under heavy attack from Hungarians, Vikings, and others. So essentially, students, what this tale tells you about is the fact that the world was now discovering itself. People from different lands were venturing into different lands. Traders from one country were going on long and long voyages, sea voyages, which would take them months to cover. Okay, now in search of new markets, in search of more more prosperity, in search of more goods, because every time they were discovering distant lands and new lands, then definitely they would also discover new items to trade with, whether it was how they could offer their services, how could they take services from them, or buy goods from them, sell it into different lands. So all uh, that effort, all that journey was always on as people were discovering new lands and new cultures. Naturally, they were also encountering different items to trade with, whether it was cloth, whether it was spices, whether it was, guys, you have to understand, for example, rubber, which came to India a long time ago. Rubber is definitely not something which was found in India before. Rubber came to us from Brazil, right? Similarly, there are a lot of items that we consider as if, as a matter of fact, that is as if it was always found in India, is not so. A lot of stuff came to us from the Latin American countries, the European countries. So this is something that needs to be understood, and that could have only happened when people were moving into different parts of the world, in different lands, in search of different items, in search of more prosperity, in search of better opportunities for life. And that is what it is talking here, that, and because of this this whole activity that started happening in 15th and 16th, and in fact many years before that as well, where people had gradually started exploring different places around the world, when naturally the whole different trading centers started coming up. in different parts of the world where the ships used to dock, where the traders used to assemble, exchange their goods with each other, and would make profits. So that is how different cities and towns, which later became extremely important, were being discovered. In fact, many of the towns which you consider to be very, very important today, all of that were being gradually discovered at that point in time. So the influence in the next paragraph, the influence of commerce in towns in the feudal order came to evolve, and change encouraged the Mediterranean entrepreneurs in Venice and Genoa from the 12th century. Their ships carried on growing trade with Muslim states and the remains of the Roman Empire in the East, attracted by the lure of wealth in these areas and inspired by the idea of freeing holy places associated with Christ from Muslims. European kings reinforced links across the Mediterranean during the Crusades. Trade within Europe improved, centered on fairs in the port cities of the Baltics and the North Sea, and stimulated by a growing population. Students, I really wish we were in class and I could have shown you, I could have drawn certain things on the board and shown you what it is about. But let me just tell you one thing. Islam came in the 7th century, right? Yes, Islam came in the 7th century, and Christianity happens to be 600 years, almost 600 years older than Islam. Okay, so naturally, once the Christianity had happened, the Europe had converted into Christian lands. Okay, and so the areas in and around Mediterranean was all about Christianity. The countries that you know today as European countries, they all had Christianity by then. Okay, so when Islam came, that came 600 years later. Now, the people of this faith, that is Islam, they also the the interesting thing is that Islam also developed in the same geography where Christ had come from, right? So that is the interesting thing. It is not that Christ was born in Jerusalem and probably Islam started in Japan or Philippines. No, it did not. It also started in the same area, if not the same city, of course, but not far from where Christ was. So you have to understand that there was too much religion in just a very small geography. So it was bound to create problems, right? It was bound to create conflicts whereby people with different faith and belief systems would come into collision with each other, and that is what actually started in the 11th and the 12th and the 13th centuries, because the crusades that happened during this point in time was of extreme importance, because as I said, Islam came 600 years after Christianity. So naturally, there were a lot of important religious sites that were related to Christianity. The different churches, important tombs, and all these things were associated with Christianity. And so when Islam started spreading its wings, it was bound to create problems, because both of them had their center of activity around the same area. As I said, it's not that Islam came in Russia or Philippines or Japan, that yes, there would be a great distances between these two different faiths. No, it was both of them almost were from the same geography, so they were now on a collision course. We shall continue. Thanks.